listening to Represent, the queermusicals.com podcast. Hello everyone and welcome to Represent, the queermusicals.com podcast. My name's James Lovelock and I'm joined today by Matthew Koon. Matthew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Matthew Koon. I am an actor, dancer, general creative, multi-hyphenate, millennial. For the last 8 years, I worked with Northern Ballet, where I was the first soloist. Previous to that, I was Billy Elliot on the West End, and now I am living the freelance actor life, living the highs and lows and loving every bit.
Excellent news. That's great. You have such a varied career. You've done lots of things.
I always dread when people ask me to introduce myself. It's like, what do I say? And that's like, probably sounds like a humble brag, but it's actually genuinely quite difficult for me to articulate who I am and what I'm up to, because I just do a bit of everything. So,
which is great. It's good to have all of those different skills.
Well,
so on this podcast, we're talking a bit about representation and particularly, I suppose, a bit about seeing Ourselves in media. Whether that's film or theatre or whatever that might be. So I was going to start off maybe by talking to you a bit about your inspirations and thinking a little bit about who has inspired you in terms of the different areas that you work in.
Right. Gosh. Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, I'm just thinking like Sandra Oh. I don't know why. That's the first name that came to my head. She's just a brilliant actress, obviously. But just seeing her in Grey's Anatomy and watching her in Killing Eve and all the other amazing things that she's done. As an East Asian person myself, not often you get to see other East Asians on screen, let alone in the Western world speaking English and well, she's Canadian, but she's obviously big in America. But in the Western setting. So I was born in England, so my first language was Cantonese, but it is now predominantly English, and my Cantonese is probably at the level of 5-year-old, let's say. But yeah, she's a huge inspiration, I think, just seeing someone killing the game in the acting world. But in terms of dancing, like, I think that's the great thing about ballet, like, growing up, I had so many role models. There's lots of East Asian dancers out there from all over the world. And I'm struggling to pinpoint one person, but I think in general, that probably is a good thing because there were just so many people to look up to.
Which is not so much the case, I guess, particularly in Western television and film and theatre as well. I mean, clearly there must be a lot of Chinese actors that are working, but we perhaps don't see them. If you're somebody that's been brought up in the UK,
absolutely,
you may not have access to those people.
Yes, there is obviously a huge industry for acting in East Asian countries, China, South Korea, Japan. But to see East Asian actors in the West is still very rare. I will say maybe a few years ago when Crazy Rich Asians came out, that was a huge turning point for me, just to see them on screen was amazing. But I would say, British East Asians, we're on the come up.
Definitely.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things with musical theatre, which is the area that I predominantly work in, is that we are now starting to see more Asian actors being given roles and being given principal roles as well, in particularly in revivals, I think.
Yes.
There's a lovely group called Representation that I've mentioned on the podcast a couple of times before. And there are a number of actors who are kind of linked in with that are doing very well. But the other thing as well is it must be quite difficult because we tend to talk about, in a similar way to how we talk about black as if it's like one identity, people will talk about Asian identities. And obviously that covers a huge number of different people and different genres as well, because, Bollywood would be an Asian genre, but may not necessarily be one that you would be particularly involved with or linked into.
Although having said that, last night I started a film called RRR, so it's 3 R's in a row, and I think it's Bollywood or Tollywood, one of those.
Okay.
and I've seen a lot of people raving about it. It's a superhero film. But yeah, I started watching that last night.
I think I want to watch that now. It sounds amazing.
Bit of random information.
No, I do. I love a superhero film. I do. And again, I mean, I suppose that's one of the things, again, that's been talked about recently with Ms. Marvel as well. And starting to get more black actors, Asian actors. But again, thinking about the fact that, you know, there isn't just one type of black, or there isn't just one type of Asian actor. And when people are looking to be represented, I mean, this is maybe something that you would be able to talk more about, but, you know, thinking about what does it mean for you to be represented?
Yeah. Oh, I think about this a lot because, like, it is one of the main reasons why I wanted to pursue acting again after having had a career in ballet. It's because, you know, I often find myself looking for that representation. I'm trying to see myself somewhere in, may that be in, you know, I love K-pop, or I loved K-pop growing up. I'm not as up to date with it at the moment, but I still really enjoy it. But a big part of me loving K-pop was seeing East Asians singing, dancing, just being amazing. And also along that line, I love K-drama. I loved K-dramas growing up as well, because I could see people who looked like me, East Asian, although Korean. You know, just seeing myself was such a powerful thing. And there's the whole thing, you can't be it unless you see it.
Yes.
But that was a big reason why I wanted to get into acting again. It's because I realized I was spending so much time looking for myself. And if I can't see it, why don't I be it myself? And I knew I wanted to. I knew I wanted to get back into acting. I wanted to pursue it seriously, and whatever that means. There's no way to pursue acting apart from just
seriously.
Just seriously.
Very serious acting.
Serious actor, guys. I'm really not. But yeah, that was a big reason because I couldn't see it, so I want to be it. Yeah.
I think that's particularly true again in theatre and musical theatre. It's taken a very long time to start to get anything beyond the really hideous things like The King and I, which is not particularly truthful representation. But actually, you were talking about K-pop. I know of two musicals around K-pop that are being developed at the moment.
Really?
Yeah, one in London, and there's one in New York, which is, I think, opening in October or November.
Wow. Which is the one in New York? I think I know of the one in London that's in development.
Yeah, the one in New York, I think they did a version at the Ars Nova, and it was kind of an immersive piece. It's written by Helen Park and Max Vernon, and it's transferring to Broadway, I think in October or November of this year. So there's two pieces of work that are being made at the moment, and that's fantastic. We were also talking a little bit earlier on about Interstate, which is a musical that I've been following for the last 5 years because I love it, and that has several queer Asian characters, East Asian characters, and South Asian characters, and is really important, I think, in starting to open that world as well.
Yes,
and it's lovely to have that sort of representation as well. Yes. And I don't know how you feel about this, but sometimes I think it gets really difficult when we are part of more than one minority group.
Yes.
So I've spoken about this. Yeah, I've spoken about this on another podcast as well. But I find that as somebody that is both a member of the LGBTQ community and also has anxiety and various other things to do with my health, and it's very difficult sometimes to talk across both of those things and to see both of those things being represented. So yeah, I don't know whether that's something you could maybe talk more about.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on it. The two, like, the marginalized groups that I would say I identify with is in the UK is British, East and Southeast Asian, and also being part of the LGBTQ plus community, being a gay man. So there's one thing about trying to find representation in seeing the East Asians, but then on top of that, how do I see or find a representation that is East Asian and gay? And, I mean, I guess it has been difficult, But recently, oh my God, I watched a film called Fire Island. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't, and I'm going to put that on my list now with the other one that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, it was so much fun. Yes, RRR and Fire Island. I don't know why. These are just springing to my mind. This is not like a film review podcast. But yeah, no, I watched that recently, and it was written by Joel Kim Booster and starring Bowen Yang. It centers around a gay East Asian male identity. And it was just such a fun watch. Like, I think it was like, I watched it with my boyfriend, Ben, and he Googled it. And because we were like, this is very Pride and Prejudice vibes. And it was actually, I think it is actually based on the structure of Pride and Prejudice.
No way.
Yes, I'm going to say that, and it's probably not going to be, but I think it is, because I was like, this feels very Mr. Darcy. Like, there's one character in it that's like very Mr. Darcy. And having said that, I've literally never watched Pride and Prejudice, but somehow I knew that reference. I think I've seen Bride and Prejudice, the Bollywood version, not Bollywood coming up again. I remember watching that growing up. But yeah, it's actually loosely based. It's based on that, I think. But it was so much fun. I would watch if you're interested. Definitely
I'm always
give it
interested.
a watch.
Definitely.
So yeah, it is difficult to see myself in things, but that recently, Fire Island definitely related to that on many levels. But other than that, it's really difficult for me to think of something off the top of my head. I often find myself just, having to pick one or the other. Like I said, like growing up listening to K-pop and watching K-drama, I'm obviously relating to my East Asian side, seeing someone East Asian on screen. And then on the other hand, being gay, wanting to watch LGBTQ plus films and TV shows, more often than not, they are mostly centering white queer characters, because it's, I'm British, so I speak English. So most of these English speaking TV shows and films, yes, they center around white characters. But it is getting a lot better. I will say that there is like hope. Watched Heartstopper recently, and was beautiful. There's some queer POCs in there. Absolutely loved it. So there's hope. I like to look at it in a hopeful way, that it's getting better and it's coming soon, and hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe I can play a small part in that as well, in some way or the other. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying like I have to wait for it.
This is the thing though, isn't it? Because it was when you were saying that thing about growing up in Britain, there is no reason why the stories, all LGBTQ stories, should be centered around white people. And one of the things, again, we were talking about a little bit earlier was this idea of how much as an actor you put yourself into characters, and how often, and I don't know whether this is just true of audiences, I think this is probably true of casting directors as well, and perhaps even writers, where we've got a character and there's nothing written about that character in terms of what race they are. There's not necessarily anything in the plot that gives away the character's sexuality, or if there is, it doesn't necessarily mean that character is straight, because that character could be bisexual or pansexual. And this idea about how you can bring yourself into some of these roles. The reason I know you is from Billy Elliot, which is right at the very, very beginning of your career. And I was thinking a little bit about what you brought to that role as the first Chinese Billy.
I mean, that was many years ago, but that whole experience of being the first non-Caucasian actor to play the role of Billy was, I would say, it was lost on me. Like, not lost, but like I was, I think, probably for the better, like very oblivious to the fact that, and what that fact and how important that was and how monumental it was, I guess. I was just an 11-year-old, 10-year-old child auditioning for the role of Billy Elliot. I liked to dance, and my dance teacher just said, look, there's an audition for Billy Elliot the musical happening at the local dance community centre. Why don't you go along? I'd never seen the film Billy Elliot before that. And it was just a beautiful kind of organic kind of process. I would say, like, I was very lucky that my teacher had that foresight to say, look, it's something you can audition for. Obviously had no expectations, but yeah, I kind of, went along with it and somehow landed the role. And then suddenly was also the first non-Caucasian actor to play it. And I would say it was really, I remember there being some press coverage about it, and I had interviews with kind of Chinese news outlets and things like that. But I was so, I wish, like, but then it's almost kind of better that when you're that young, it shouldn't really, in an ideal world, it wouldn't have been a huge deal anyway. But I understand why it was a huge deal now, looking back, and I just feel very grateful that I was that person, but also, in one hand, feel very lucky that I didn't have to worry about the burden of that either.
If you're interested in LGBTQ plus representation in musical theatre, check out our website, www.queermusicals.com, for lots more information about musicals with LGBTQ plus characters. It makes me feel like as well that there must be so many other roles that it would be so great if you could almost approach them as the 11-year-old you.
Yeah.
And just go, I mean, there is really no reason that, this is just plucking these characters out of thin air, but there's no reason that James Bond could not be Chinese. Hello. There we go, perfect. I'm not saying that James Bond would be a particularly strong LGBTQ role. They'd have to do,
not yet.
Why not? But it's interesting things with like Doctor Who recently as well, and them casting Ncuti in that role is really
awesome,
fantastic. And hopefully that's something, even when we're talking about things like Pride and Prejudice, where people think, it's very archetypally, but that's where Bridgerton comes in a little bit,
right?
I think, isn't it? And so we're starting to get these things challenged, and I think that's really important. And I think also the idea, we spoke about this a bit earlier, the idea about how as queer people we connect to characters, because we make the assumption, unless we see otherwise, that these characters are straight.
Yes.
And I think it's a shame that in some ways that we do that. I don't know.
No, you said something really helpful for me going forward, that someone approaches every character, every audition as that character being queer, like that, unless otherwise stated, this character is queer. And that's just such an amazing way to approach it. I think I'm guilty of it myself. Just, I look at a character and I think, oh gosh, is this a straight character? Is this a gay character? But I didn't, I'm still, it just opened what you said has opened my mind. Like, we can approach it as any way. And if we find one connection, that's the connection that you need. And unless it's otherwise stated, it doesn't need to be one or the other.
I think there are times when it's really useful to have that sort of thing where you can just put yourself into the role, and it doesn't even need to be something that necessarily the director or the audience know about. And then equally, there's times where you think, actually, we really do need something that is explicitly written as an East Asian queer character, because otherwise people will think that East Asian queer people don't exist, or whatever it is, or that people are not going to see themselves in the media, which they should be able to.
I think explicitly probably that East Asian queer British, I have struggled to find myself. Maybe I'm not looking far enough. I know that we are here. We are here. And there is obviously communities that I'm part of, and I know we exist. But I guess, like, the other thing is, I guess, if the stories aren't out there, then write them yourself, which kind of, I did that myself recently. Wrote,
you did?
Yes. Which was, maybe it's very helpful, because it's probably not the best thing to approach an acting career in a way that's like, this, through acting, I'm going to find validation. Through acting, I'm going to be, find that healing. Like, that's not what acting is about. Acting is about playing a character. And amazing if people watching a character that you are portraying, or a character that has been written, people can find ways to relate or feel like they are being seen and healed through that, that is an amazing thing. But for me personally, for my mental health, I can't be approaching everything like that. But recently, yes, I wrote a little bit for a scratch night at the Lowry.
You did. I loved it. It was such a... I found so many things there that I hadn't seen about myself that were being represented. Yeah. And as it happened, I'm just about to leave the job that I've been doing for the last 8 years. And the thing that you wrote was a lot about that idea of leaving something that had been a big part of your life for a long time.
Yeah.
And what that meant, and how you find yourself when something that's been like the backbone of who you are for such a long time is suddenly taken away. And it's the thing that interested me is that while that was completely representative of you as an East Asian person and a queer person, it was also completely representative of me as well.
Wow.
And I think that's one of the things that I've learned over the past few years, and hopefully one of the things that these podcasts is there to address as well, is that having more stories that are being told by different people does not mean that white people specifically will connect less to those stories. And actually it's really important that as white people we know the things that are going on, and we go out of our way to look at this representation as well.
Yeah.
Just to make us realise that we are not the only people in the entire universe.
What? Surprise. Yeah, I guess writing about my truth was both cathartic and just like, it was, I'm not going to say easy. It did take a level of like self-reflection and also just to look at myself from an outside perspective. But yeah, I think I've always resonated with art, TV shows, films that are quite unfiltered and kind of almost autobiographical. So Michaela Cole and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, just their works have been so inspiring because it's just like not afraid to put a microscope on the kind of darker sides of yourself, or the ugly, or the kind of the cringe sides of yourself. And my piece I wrote about was very much about, so working as a ballet dancer for so many years and leaving that behind and coming back to my hometown, Manchester, moving home. And the shame that there's a level, like, of course, I made that decision. It took me a long time to make that decision, and I made it with a clear head, and I'm very happy about leaving that chapter of my life. But I cannot deny that there's a level of, just a bit of shame about coming back home. And maybe I just, rather than letting that feeling kind of consume me, I wanted to just look at it a bit more closely and just put it on show, because every normal person does that. But I have a few friends that also it's throwing my mind back now, so now I remember why I wrote it. Because it was I remember reading about, since the pandemic, a lot of people have been leaving and quitting their perfectly fine full-time jobs to jump into an uncertain world of either unemployment or chasing their dreams. And I noticed that a few of my friends, my age group, were leaving their jobs and coming back home. And although it was exciting, there was also, some shame around that, or some trepidation. And I wanted to just, capture that moment whilst I was in it. And it was really helpful. And I would love to write more. And I shall, I think.
I should hope so.
This is me putting it on record.
I really like that sentence. I would like to write more, and I shall.
Oh my God.
It's perfect. So I was thinking a little bit about other experiences that, because what I'm writing about at the moment is thinking about how theatre, I mean specifically musical theatre, has translated specific queer experiences onto the stage. So things like experiencing a prom at high school, the idea of coming out, perhaps finding queer community, chosen family, those sorts of things. And I was wondering if there are specific things that you can think of that you think we should be telling as stories.
Wow, it's difficult because I think the stories are being, they exist out there, obviously. And I think it's about nurturing those people who have the stories and helping them have a way to bring it out. Like, very much like myself. Like, I didn't know I could write. I didn't know I was qualified to do anything in that realm. I always saw myself as a dancer or an actor, and I get given the material and I do it. But actually creating your own material, like, it's pretty amazing. But I think I only ever felt like that I could do that through having a network of people who supported me. So specifically New Earth Theatre, who were previously Yellow Earth Theatre. They nurture British East and Southeast Asian talent in the who are in the UK, and actors and writers specifically. And they had an academy that I joined over lockdown. So literally I just found my own community, and they helped uplift my voice and gave me the tools to write about my story. So I think the thing is, it's like looking for those stories. If you are in a position to help to bring stories to the forefront, it's about looking for those people and providing an accessible way for them to be able to tell it, giving them the tools and training them in a way that, not even training, like, because some people are just amazing, they can just do it. But, allowing them the platform to do it and helping them feel like they can, because a lot of the time I think people just feel like, people don't want to hear about me because I've never seen it on TV. So how can, no one wants to hear that. But actually, you like you said, like, if someone tells their story truthfully, someone's going to relate on some way with your story. It might not be exactly your story, but there's always something in there, in that truthful storytelling, that you can find a way to relate to.
I think that's really true, definitely. I think one of the things I was thinking just then is that, I've known you for quite a long time, and the number of times where I've seen something that you've done, or there have been moments in your life where things have changed or whatever it is. And I'm really inspired by watching you go through perhaps sometimes things that were similar to things that I've gone through, and other times where it's been something that's totally uncharted for me. And cool. So, it's, and I feel that about a lot of people that I kind of know reason, or I know of, or that I follow, or whatever it is. And it does really, I guess, I find it difficult that we haven't got to the stage where some of those stories are being told more widely, rather than it feeling like the same story is being told again and again. And I was thinking this with, like, the soap operas, with things like EastEnders, and and thinking, why do the same stories come round every few? Who's burnt the Vic down this time? Who is the serial killer? And it feels like there are so many other stories we could tell, and musical theatre is just as guilty, because it's always adapting films from 30 years ago, which are all telling the same story of heterosexual love, or whatever it might be.
No, I agree. I mean, but having said that, like, it's happening. It's definitely happening. In Hollyoaks, there has recently been they've introduced a new family, and they are the first East Asian family to ever have been on Hollyoaks, and I think on a British soap. But I remember
I'm thinking that's right.
Yes, I think it was quite a monumental moment, and I have a really good friend who plays Serena, who is in that family, and actually I know a few of the writers who wrote episodes specifically for that family, but also just for the entire episodes for lots of different families and characters as well. So it's happening. Slowly, but it is happening. Do you know what I mean? But it is sad that in 2022. Oh my God, I'm going to say in 2022. But it is sad that it has taken this long. But I choose to try and be, I try to be really positive the way I look at it. And I think that is also why it was like, for me, it felt like a calling for me to be part of it and to play my role. And also so that I can retire one day or, be old one day and look back and say, yeah, I did everything I wanted to do, or at least tried to do it. And, but yeah, I think it's on the way.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you're enjoying it, don't forget to subscribe or follow on your favourite podcast service. If you want to follow us on social media, you can follow us on Twitter @QueerMusicals, or you can follow me @Dr. James Lovelock. So what you were talking about there with Hollyoaks and the writers and the actors, I think it kind of links into this idea about who gets to tell stories.
Yeah.
But also not necessarily who gets to tell the stories, but what do we gain from stories being told authentically and from having this kind of diverse range of stories out there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, God, there's so much. I mean, on like a personal level for me, it's like just great to be able to see representation, seeing characters that I'm very familiar with because it's written by maybe someone who is also of East Asian descent. So already they're going to write about hopefully they'll write about what they know, right? Like most people, I don't know. They're going to write about characters or create characters that they know. And if we have that shared experience, then it's like, wow, yeah. When I watch it, there is a level of, I know these people, I've met these people feel real and authentic. So I think there's that to gain. And also the other side is like for actors as well. Just if I were to write an episode, like this is a theoretical situation, of course I'd want to write about a lot of people in my life. So that would be East Asian people, queer people. And that in that way, like for actors, when people write for you, it's amazing because even if you don't land that role, it's just amazing to see people doing it, and it's a win for us in that sense. Because why can't we be up there?
This is a bit of a tangent off that, but I was just thinking about Merlin.
Oh yes,
and thinking about you playing the title role in that your swan song as a dancer. Well, no, it's not your swan song as a dancer, is it? But
well,
your last role with Northern Ballet.
Yes, yes.
And thinking about how that role, do you feel like that role was kind of developed with you in mind to some extent?
So with Merlin, Drew McConey was the choreographer who is the most lovely person. You know him.
I do, yes.
He's an amazing person to work with. I always felt like at any given moment, Drew could just get up and do it.
Get out of the way, Matthew.
Yeah, I was like, dude, wow, you're amazing. But I think he really did put himself into Merlin's shoes as and he created Merlin from his kind of experiences of growing up as a queer person. And there's lots of elements of Merlin in. He's not explicitly queer, actually. Yeah. Well, we don't know. It's up to interpretation. But the whole idea of him being an outcast and him feeling like different from everybody else because of his magical powers. Yeah. It's almost like the magical powers were a metaphor for his sexuality. Yeah. And the story revolves around Merlin. His adopted mother, the blacksmith, is, from her perspective, she's trying to protect Merlin, and she tries to encourage him to hide his magic and to just try and be like everybody else because the magic is different and the magic can get you in trouble. And this is set in a world where it's Camelot. Yeah. Back then.
In the olden days.
In the olden days. Anyway. So magic was different. So he was always encouraged to hide his magic. And the main character arc for Merlin throughout the ballet is that he finds how to harness his powers and also find a way to accept his powers, and like and it was very, you know, he did Drew did say it is a queer coded storyline. It's not explicitly queer, but like there's no doubt that, you know, there is a parallel there with the magical powers being almost like a metaphor for his sexuality. So by the end, he accepts his powers, and also his adopted mother, the blacksmith, loves and accepts him for his powers as well, and also teaches him, like, there's a beautiful moment where she just tells him it's okay in ballet terms.
Lovely.
She mimes or she dances that, you know, your powers are okay, and actually your powers are your strength. So yeah, I think definitely, like, I saw myself in Merlin a lot specifically because of the choreographer Drew and the way he created that story, and he did it from his experience. So I related to that as well.
Yeah, it's really lovely. I do love the idea of being gay being a superpower.
Well, it is.
Yeah. I'm gonna gay you. Oh, such fun. But no, it's really lovely. And also, I suppose one of the things is that although it's not specifically written necessarily as an East Asian role, the fact that you are playing it as an East Asian person means that that's what the audience will see.
Yes.
And so in that sense, it is coded as a queer East Asian when you're playing that role.
Yes, absolutely.
And actually, that goes back to, I think, something that we gain from, you know, a wider representation. Because sometimes, you know, like we were saying earlier, sometimes it's good to have explicit stories about those communities. Other times, just by including those communities, you're already adding to the representation as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely that. Like a bit of both, isn't it? It's not one hard rule for all of it. Yeah, because like you said, there's so many times where you watch things and it's like nothing about this character has meant, there's no reason why this character couldn't be a different ethnicity and not white. Yeah, so there's a beauty in, you know, just switching that up, but also I'm literally repeating what you said, or writing specific characters.
Well, you repeated it very beautifully. I can see why you're an actor.
Yes, just repeat lines.
But actually, the thing with ballet as well is it's very difficult, and with dance in general, it's very difficult to be explicit about those things. I mean, obviously Matthew Bourne manages it. I've just seen The Car Man. He very much manages it.
Explicit in another sense.
Yes, but
I've not seen that. I'd love to see it.
It was wonderful. But yeah, it's, you know, sometimes with dance, because it's less tangible, you know, it's less verbal.
Yes.
Actually, that can be a really good way of unlocking representation in a way, because there's much more scope for the audience to put their own interpretation on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that's something that will hope, you know, when you're acting, maybe that's something that will come from your dance background as well.
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely, I always did find the ballet world to be very at the, in many ways it's not, but in terms of growing up, like I mentioned before, there were a lot of East Asian dancers out there, or there were a few out there, and they were, you know, in casts which were essentially, I don't know what the term is these days, but it's colorblind casting. Like it didn't matter that their parents were not the same ethnicity as they were, and just that. And at the end of the day, it's, I guess you go to the theatre and there's a level of suspended belief anyway, but as long as you can go with that, it's just, you're still gonna enjoy the show, right? But yeah, ballet was really good for that in terms of colorblind casting. Sometimes
it will be interesting to see things like the K-pop musicals that we mentioned, and musicals where there is clearly East Asian writers and creatives involved. I mean, that was one of the things that was wonderful about Interstate as well, is that you get some very clear things which are clearly from a Chinese background. I always think about the song Loser Dumplings, which is, I will put a link to in somewhere with this podcast, but which is just such a beautiful way of using a metaphor to to tell the story of falling in love, and it's very much, you know, it's very clearly from a Chinese background, as well as being very much an experience that everybody can relate to.
Yes.
There's.
I'd love to listen to that. I'd love to see Interstate.
Interstate was wonderful.
You went to LA to watch it.
I did, because I was a very lucky person.
Very, very lucky.
Yes, yeah.
Next time, take me.
I will see if you'll fit. I mean, I could only take hand luggage this time, so you'd have to get quite small.
Fit into hand luggage. I'm not that tall.
So you've recently finished filming on Greatest Days, which was with Drew Macconey again.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yes. It was so much fun. So I was a dancer in this. Greatest Days is the movie musical is coming out next year, I believe. It's the movie musical for Take That, using all Take That songs.
Yeah.
I was a dancer in it. Drew, it was great to work with Drew again. Having worked with him for Merlin, and it was just amazing to work with him again, but in a different field and also closer to the realm that I want to go into more in the future, which is screen.
Yeah. Can you please note that down, casting directors?
Note that down. Let me just be very specific. I wouldn't rule anything out, let's be honest. I'm not in a position to be picky. It was a lot of fun. It was just, so joyous from the scenes that I was in. Just a totally different animal to theatre and stage. And I've done some like music videos and stuff before in the past, and I've danced on screen a few times in commercials and stuff. But working on such a huge project and just seeing how Drew is in different environments, and also it's just good for me to just be on set and just to get to soak in that kind of vibe, that environment, because that is what I really want to do more of. It was a lot of fun, and also to use dance, which is something I'm really comfortable with and love to do. So I didn't have to really worry. I did worry, but I didn't have to, worry like, oh my God, I'm on set, this is new. And then also now I have to act, like this is too many new things. It's kind of like a soft launch, or like a nice way to go into that world. But it was really a lot of fun.
I was thinking of music videos in general and how important music videos are to the LGBTQ community particularly. And it's really weird because Take That are very, very straight. I think I'm right in saying that. But Take That are very much, certainly remembering as, what would I have been, probably early teens when Take That were around, there was a huge queer following for Take That.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I feel like there's something, because of the sorts of things that they covered, things like Relight My Fire, and things that were sort of quite 70s in, things like How Deep Is Your Love?
Right.
And all that sort of disco feel. It just feels like there's something, I don't know, there's something quite queer about the...
Queers love to party in the disco.
We did. Yeah, I don't know, there is definitely a reason. Not everyone.
That
not
was
you.
A blanket statement.
Stop it immediately. But there is something about that sort of music and that kind of the joy that is in music videos. I'm thinking also of things like, these are all, I presumably anyway, these are all straight artists, I think, but things like Madonna and the backing dancers in Madonna and some of the coding in that. And did you find any of that when you were in the dances that you did?
Just that the casting just in general, across the board, there was diversity, and that was ethnic diversity, and also with sexuality, I believe, and also like gender representation and things like that. Looking around on that set and all the other dancers and the cast members, I felt like there was it was definitely inclusive.
That's really lovely to hear, because one of the other things that I think I've been really hoping for is that we will get out of this idea that dance has to be very binary and that it always has to be male-female couples. And if there's anything that's remotely sexualized, it must be heterosexual.
Yeah.
And we don't get, two boys dancing together or two girls dancing together and that sort of thing. I mean, I guess particularly in ballet that's embedded, but I think also even in musical theatre and even perhaps in the sort of genre we're talking about here, it's unusual to get sort of explicit queer representation there.
Yeah, it's true. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I probably don't know. I mean, apart from Matthew Bourne's productions, like in dance, I definitely didn't do any queer, apart from Merlin. Actually, no, I did a beautiful piece by Lal Lubavitch, and it was created during the AIDS crisis in and it was a duet between two men, and it was my first year in the company, and I was dancing with one of the soloists at the time, and it was two men, and we did that in London at the Royal Opera House in the Limbury stage, and it was one of the most beautiful pieces that I've ever danced personally. It was a lot of fun. I was lifted a lot. I was lifted a lot, and that was just so much fun. My partner was incredible, Giuliano. Strong partner, but it was definitely a crowd favorite. Like every night there was standing ovations, big cheers, and I don't usually take note of that. To me, a performance is like someone out there, they don't need to be standing and cheering and clapping for me to know that that they enjoyed the performance, but there was a actual it was notable, you can notice it, and people were just loved it. I think it was a queer relationship on stage, and that is one of my highlights, I think. And I'd love to do more of that going forward, but in the dance world I can't think off the top, there's not too many. There needs to be more.
Definitely.
Male on male, female on female partnering, just a bit more of that,
Yeah, and of course with non-binary actors and non-binary dancers coming more to the forefront as well, it starts to challenge those things. It's particularly within a company where it's an ensemble choreography and it's partnered. It starts to kind of challenge that idea about these bodies are only capable of doing this and these bodies are only capable of doing that.
Absolutely.
And hopefully that will, that's beneficial to everybody. Particularly thinking of, all of the very tall women out there, or all of the small and slender men out there that, that are forced into these roles, which maybe...
And I struggled with that a lot. I'm smaller and used to be very slender. Growing up being a young dancer, I knew that in the ballet world it was very male and female binary, and men had to lift women, and I had to I was told many times that I needed to get stronger, get bigger, be more masculine, be more grounded, be that element, that grounding element, so that I can lift the female. So it was very rooted in, the gender binary, or this masculine and feminine expression of gender. And it was a struggle. I remember that. It just felt like someone telling me that I wasn't right all the time, which is actually one of the reasons, why I felt, ballet, I've done everything I can do there. I know what it will take to keep going, and you know what, I want to pursue other things where I can maybe just be myself a bit more. And I loved it. I did some amazing things, but it was you just reminded me of that, how structured it is for your for the gender roles.
I always find it strange because there's absolutely no reason for it other than to uphold heterosexuality.
And a specific image of what that should look like, or what men or women should look like from whoever's very close perspective. It was that is
So hopefully that's something that is people are starting to challenge a bit in dance particularly, but also thinking about different voices and in acting as well, and thinking about maybe we don't have to have a certain type of person that plays a certain type of role.
Yes.
So it's exciting times. I was going to finish off by asking you a question in terms of what you would like to do in the future. What sort of if you could play any roles or any sorts of roles in the future, what sort of things would you like to do?
Wow. Ultimately, I think what I would like to do is just to do projects that the dream is to do projects that resonate with me, right?
Yeah.
To do projects that leave a positive impact on this earth, and just to be truthful and to be to uplift voices, and to help people feel seen. And as an artist, I'd love to do things that challenge me, like do roles that are out of my comfort zone, and to keep growing. I think keep growing, and that's what I want to do. Just keep growing and doing different things, and hopefully leaving a positive impact. Yeah.
That sounds great. You always inspire me, Matthew, whenever I talk to you. And I really hope all of those things happen. And I really look forward to seeing what's next for you.
Oh, thank you so much.
But thank you very much for coming along to record this podcast.
It's been a pleasure.
And thank you all very much for listening at home. And I'll see you next time. Next week on Represent, the queermusicals.com podcast, we've got a special episode recorded in Los Angeles with the cast and creative team of Intersect, a new musical.
James, I feel like you're quoting the show, and you haven't even... I just thought you were just going to start singing the lyrics. I was like, are you sure?
This episode will come out on Friday the 26th of August. See you there.